This is actually not a roguelike. Or is it? You might be surprised to hear how divisive this question truly is. So, what is a roguelike? The origin of the subgenre is based on the early 80s game Rogue, a dungeon crawler with procedurally generated levels, turn-based gameplay, grid-based movement, and permanent death. But this word has been creating a lot of division and confusion in the community lately. So why is there so much debate around it? Recently, I released a detailed analysis video explaining the design of roguelikes and roguelites and why they are so popular today. And when looking at the comment section, I noticed many people discussing and disagreeing on the definition of this subgenre. If you go on Steam today and look up roguelikes hoping to play some good old traditional rogue gameplay, you might be a bit disappointed. Because in the last few years, the term has changed a lot from its original form. Upon its release, Rogue inspired some developers to release games that were true successors such as NetHack and Moria. These were true roguelikes when looking at the original definition. But as the years went by in the 21st century, with the incredibly fast development of video game technology, developers could now have much more freedom with how to design and create games, including real-time gameplay. The developers of Rogue didn't really have the option of creating whatever they wanted with their limitation and stuck to a turn-based gameplay, mimicking popular games at the time such as Dungeons & Dragons. So instead of making similar games to Rogue, we started seeing new roguelikes take small portions of inspiration from its former ancestor, by removing the turn-based aspect and instead only keeping the permanent death mechanic and randomly generated levels. This new form of roguelikes became very popular quickly with the release of games such as The Binding of Isaac and Spelunky, creating the start of action roguelikes and this new wave of modern roguelikes we see today. As more years went by, many developers started noticing the appeal of the procedurally generated levels and permanent death and the simplicity of designing this kind of game and started creating more and more of these new roguelikes. With the realization that these games were no longer bounded by the original core design of Rogue, developers saw an opportunity to create new unique ideas and started implementing this new age definition, which by now was only defined by permanent death and procedurally generated levels, into any other existing genre, such as third-person action roguelikes, deck-building roguelikes, tower defense roguelikes, FPS action roguelikes, the list goes on. And while a lot of these new games added more titles such as the term action to the roguelike design, the more this subgenre got popular, the more people started stripping these added terms from it altogether and simply calling them roguelikes, even if they were drastically different from its original idea, rogue. Because something else to keep in mind is that when looking at the situation from a business standpoint, calling a game a straightforward roguelike as opposed to, for instance, a third-person action roguelite is more appealing and recognizable to the general population. But wait a minute, we do have a way to distinguish a modern-day roguelike to a traditional one. We now have the term Roguelite, which was created as a way to differentiate these two genres in the early 2010s, is what I wish I could say. Because with the rise of this new design style used in many independent games today, an even newer concept was seeing a rise in popularity at the same time: the idea of a permanent progression system. With a genre focused around permanent death, the traditional gameplay of roguelikes is, to no surprise, quite challenging. More challenging than most other game genres out there, meaning that it may not be appealing to a lot of the general population. But what if every time you die in these games, some sort of progression was kept so that even if you weren't able to complete a run, there was still some sort of progression beyond the individual run, such as an upgrade system, new permanent abilities? With this new concept, players can more freely take their time and eventually have a much better chance at completing a run and beating the game thanks to these new upgrades. Hades' popularity would probably never have reached this high if the game was a hardcore traditional roguelike experience, because few people would even be able to beat a run once. The term roguelite is now being used as a subgenre to explain a progression system instead of its original intended purpose of differentiating traditional roguelikes to modern roguelikes. And yet, just to add more confusion, advertisers and most casual gamers will still call Hades a roguelike as opposed to a roguelite. Because even with this new attempt to separate these subgenres, the term roguelike is more recognizable and more appealing than roguelite, a newer term that is not as familiar to many. So now we have roguelikes, which supposedly is used to define a turn-based game, and a roguelite, which is supposed to mean a modern roguelike that strips away the turn-based gameplay, but is instead now being used to simply indicate that there is a progression system. With all of these new meanings, many people from the roguelike community have been trying to discuss and simplify how to identify these new roguelikes, while other less committed gamers and developers decide to instead call most of these games by their root and original inspiration, roguelikes, a term that almost everyone is now at least somewhat familiar with. Today, if someone wanted to actually find a roguelike that is true to its original definition, they would have to look up the term traditional roguelike or even turn-based roguelike, which is ironic, all things considered. And this situation isn't new to the video game community when looking at another genre, such as Souls-likes. Originally used to define a game by it resembling Dark Souls, the term is now being thrown in many games and is now instead used to only reference the feeling the original game had, just because people are much more aware of this term thanks to the success of Dark Souls than any new or complicated genre that would probably be more fitting. So, what do I think of all this? I do think it's a shame that the original term has been shifted so much throughout the years and that there isn't a new word for roguelikes we see today. Because the entire purpose of having a genre linked to a game is so that players can know whether a game is a good fit for them and what to expect before buying it. But I also understand that time in the video game world moves faster than ever before, and I don't expect the meaning to come back to its original form. When working in the video game industry in this day and age, few people are going to want to know about the specifics of defining an indie game's genre and are more likely just going to go with whatever is more familiar to the general population and what sounds best as a marketing tool. I expect the term roguelikes to be used more and more throughout the years, and its original definition fading away further and further. Yet even though I find this to be somewhat saddening, losing such an iconic meaning to history, I do believe there's a good side to all of this. The independent video game industry has been bigger than ever before, being one of the only indie industries in the world to actually compete with bigger corporations such as AAA companies. And with the recent success and popularity of modern roguelikes, we've been seeing more and more growth in independent developers, something that I personally find amazing. We live in a time where video games evolve so fast that we may not always control a lot of outcomes. This is why the definition of roguelikes and even roguelites today is quite subjective. I don't expect everyone to be happy about this, and that's okay. I'm a huge fan of the roguelike community, and I'm just happy to see it be so alive today. I hope this video may shine some light on those confused or just curious. Whether we agree or not, a game that has some sort of procedurally generated level and permanent death is now, most of the time, simply going to be called a roguelike. Thanks for watching.